Girls and women have a right to be equal everywhere.
In every country and in every aspect of life.
Yet girls and women face discrimination and exclusion in every country in the world,
which holds everyone back.
But people around the world are fighting for fairness.
Combating stereotypes,
building inclusive systems,
supporting women's economic opportunity,
fighting for health equity,
and defending voting rights and legal protections for women around the world.
We won't stop
until we achieve equality
for all girls and all women,
wherever they are.
Let the world know you stand with the champions and change makers
working to ensure girls and women are equal everywhere.
Join us in candid discussions
with those on the front line of this fight
in our discussion series, Champions for Change.
Champions for Change.
And follow along using @UN Foundation, #EqualEverywhere.
Hello, I'm Michelle Milford Morse, Vice President for Girls and Women's Strategy at the United Nations Foundation. Welcome to a Champions for Change discussion. Health inequities have been exposed and exacerbated by the pandemic everywhere, with too many still denied equal access to vaccines and treatments. But these issues are even further exacerbated in contexts where there's violent conflict or the forced displacement of people. But health equity affects everyone, everywhere, with distinct and amplified effects for the world's girls and women. Today, we are going to talk about just that. I'll be joined by two experts, Anna Naya, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at AmerisourceBergen, and Martha Rebor. She's the Executive Director of Shot at Life. Today, we're going to talk about our collective health, the health of our systems, and the promise and responsibility of equity. Thank you for joining us. Welcome. And Martha, I'm so pleased to have you here with us today for this discussion. And Martha, I'm going to start with you, a question for you about the social and economic brunt that women have shouldered during this pandemic, everything from the unpaid care burden to filling the school gaps to being the frontline health workers. But the experience is not the same for all women everywhere. Tell us about how the pandemic has been particularly trying for women in certain contexts.
Yeah, thank you. Pleased to be here. And thanks for the question, Michelle. I think this is such an important issue to raise because we have heard that women have been disproportionately affected, but what exactly does that mean? So I think getting a little bit specific is helpful in this context. And, just for instance, in Africa alone, 70% of the health workforce is women. So that means women are the ones on the front lines caring for patients, putting their health at risk, and then we know their families' health at risk. They have really been doing the care around the pandemic. And then we know on the side, the effects of the pandemic, there have been more than 7 million unwanted pregnancies, more than 30 million cases of gender-based violence. Overall, 100 million people have been pushed into poverty. And these are estimates because, again, we need better data. We need sex aggregated data to really understand and to sort of wrap our brains around the extent of how this has been affecting women. But we do know, particularly in the countries where Shot at Life works, particularly in Africa, women have been disproportionately affected.
No, it's true, Martha. Even without optimal data, there's plenty to worry about when we think about girls and women and the pandemic. And you're new in this role. And so you're thinking about these questions at work in particular. You're a new Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. Tell me about how you think about this at AmerisourceBergen.
When you think about the impact of the pandemic on women, you have to think about that as being on top of another burden. So women are twice as likely to suffer from depression, anxiety, insomnia. And then you move into the pandemic where they are the frontline workers, they're the providers of care. And so what's so important in the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion is to really seek to understand the experience and have a culture that accommodates those different perspectives and experiences and backgrounds that allow for individuals to still thrive at work. And so creating a culture of inclusion makes it psychologically safe to talk about mental health, to talk about what's happening in our communities and in our lives that impacts us, and really recognize that, you know, people come to work as a whole person, and that whole person sometimes carries a burden that is different than your own.
Well, you two are talking about what it means to be equal everywhere, at work, at home, in any country. And you're aligned in passion and purpose on several fronts. And in fact, you're about to launch a new initiative together. Martha, tell us about this new initiative.
Yes, thanks, Michelle. I'd love to. We are so pleased. We've had a relationship with AmerisourceBergen for a few years now, and with this new partnership with the foundation, they will be investing in work to protect refugees from the pandemic. So these are people who fall outside of national health systems, often have problems accessing health services, and again, have been really affected by the pandemic. So the partnership will provide everything from testing and treatment all the way through to vaccinations for these people. And the other aspect of the partnership is that it will be supporting Shot at Life's work. We're launching some work around vaccine confidence and using influencers and social media channels to really make sure that accurate information around vaccines and around global immunization is being shared. I think we feel like there's been a little bit of a vacuum on all the positive news around vaccines. So we're really looking forward to leaning in there, and the partnership is critical to our being able to do this work.
Oh, I like the sound of that. And why did AmerisourceBergen decide to invest in this program?
So yes, Shot at Life is exactly where we want to be when we live up to our purpose of creating healthier futures. And the idea is access to life-saving vaccines, so important for the most vulnerable among us in the world. And that would be the displaced folks around the globe that are moving from place to place without access to healthcare. But in addition, I love this idea of being an advocate. So to get after this, misinformation and myths out there that would really dissuade people from these life-saving vaccines. And so it's not only an access to health care, but it's also access to health information that allows for folks to have the best care. And it also is in addition to our efforts largely for addressing those groups, even in the US or around the globe, that don't have access to healthcare on the same level. So it's a great partnership, both united in the purpose of creating that health equity around the globe.
Well, it gives me hope for sure. And we need that because the pandemic has tried our patience and really tested our hope. So let's wrap the conversation with one last question. First to you, Martha, what gives you hope right now?
Great question, Michelle. I tend to be an optimist, and I think in some ways I'm lucky because working in the field of vaccines, I've seen what happens when the world comes together with a common purpose and is aligned in their goals. Early on in this century, we recognized that measles was a leading killer of children. And when the world got together and said, look, we have a vaccine against this disease, and laid plans to vaccinate children around the world, childhood measles deaths went down by 70%. We talk about polio. Used to be a leading case of paralysis for children around the world. Everybody got together, rolled out plans for wide-scale vaccines. Polio cases are down by 99%, really just left in one country right now. So I can be optimistic because I know what happens when the world comes together. I'm also incredibly optimistic because I have the great fortune of working with a lot of young people at UN Foundation, and I see how informed they are and how engaged they are. They know about the major challenges facing them, and they're living very purposeful lives, whether it's the products the companies that make the products they're choosing to buy, or what they're using their free time for. Often some of their professional lives too, but they want to make a difference. And it's not just the Greta and the Malala and the Simon Biles who inspire all of us, but these are, young people that I get to work with at UNF or who are volunteers for Shot at Life. And what I really inspired by young women is that not only are they being these incredible serving as role models, but they're really reaching out to mentor others, to mentor other girls and really pave the way. So that makes me feel incredibly optimistic.
Me too. And how would you answer that question? What makes you feel optimistic and hopeful?
Well, what makes me hopeful is, in addition to young folks really stepping up to be advocates for change, it's also partnerships like this. So Shot at Life, UN Foundation, AmerisourceBergen, the three of us coming together to create solutions we haven't seen before, to show up as global citizens to make a difference and provide health equity. And where governments haven't been able to do it, where corporations alone or nonprofits alone haven't been able to do it, we are bigger and better than the sum of our parts. And together we're going to solve these inequities and disparities around the globe.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you to our panelists for this lively discussion. And thanks to you for watching this Champions for Change discussion. We hope that you will continue the conversation at home, at work, and online, and with the hashtag #EqualEverywhere. Thank you.